me myself. All right, is everybody in here? Hello? Cool. What's up, everybody? You probably know by now I'm Will, along with Joel and John here at Virtual. We've been putting together this Angular event for 10 months now. So thank you all for coming. Thanks to Virtual for letting us take the space. Thanks to Scott, who is not here today. I want to turn. Do I want to mute mine? Oh, it's playing. It's playing over this. Playing over this. I think I must be watching this.
Do you have the volume next to you over there?
Just hit mute at the bottom. No?
There we go.
There it is.
This all 3 hours ago. Just let it play.
Someone actually
was not supposed to repeat
it. So yeah, give a big shout out to Scott Silvey at Scott Silvey on Twitter. He's bankrolling all the pizza and beer. So, and yeah, thanks to the people who showed up, who are the people who RSVP'd. There's definitely not 48 people in this room. So, announcements we generally start off with. Is anyone hiring or looking for work? Go ahead, shout it out. This is the time to do so. Yes, no, maybe so, Micah.
We're hiring over at Apex Systems. If you guys are looking, let us know.
Who are you?
I'm Micah Rustin with Apex Systems. This is Luke Hoffman.
We're an IT staffing.
You guys are in United?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Cool. All right. Call for presenters. Scott has volunteered to continue his kind of deep dive on how Angular is put together for next month. So that's what we got lined up for November. If you got something you want to do in December, please talk to me. Post it on the Meetup board. Otherwise, maybe we'll do another hack night. Who knows? Any other announcements in the Angular world or just things people want to talk about? No. Okay. Does anyone have a lightning talk that they wanted to get up here and show off something they're working on, or some code they found, or some problem that they have they want to ask the group about? You can bring those things and not feel shy about it. But we haven't had people do it a lot lately. So. Okay, well, then we'll just let Doug roll then. We have Doug Ford here, who flew up from Phoenix to talk to us about Angular. I will be running his slide deck up here. So. Unless I unplug the wrong case, it won't work very well. There we go. Let's get your slides up.
All right, so basically my name is Douglas Ford. I work for SkyView Networks in Scottsdale, Arizona. I am the lead software engineer. Primarily keep our team focused on front end. We do a lot of back end script features, web services, stuff like that. And a lot of link because we're a .NET shop. But primarily, most of our code we try and keep in the front end. So basically, back in 2010, I started working at SkyView Networks. They had a need to move their legacy VB6 applitions to web world, get away from the front end or from the back end like that, and with heavy old school languages and poor database communication and such. So I had the idea, hey, why don't we move to a more front-end world? That's kind of the way Google, Facebook, all these technologies are doing it. So why don't we do that? You know, I can use a lot of jQuery. We can make things really kind of cool, kind of animated, kind of more responsive, less refreshes, so on and so forth. It was that MVC, a lot of other cool technologies, but they really weren't impressed with all the front-end stuff that was showing them. So I moved us to that, but by about 2012, we're realizing our maintenance for these applications were growing to be extremely heavy. Essentially, these applications were going to be like 10 to 20,000 lines of code per application in just JavaScript. And that was extremely brutal because of upkeep and everything else that comes along with dealing with jQuery. So needless to say, we had to figure something out. So I was looking into some of the more modern MVC frameworks for JavaScript, because they still wanted to stay with primarily front end, even though Razor and all their cool things were coming out. So I was looking and experimenting with Backbone, Knockout, Ember, and did you have something to say?
No, we have somebody else coming and going, but.
Oh, okay. So essentially, I was playing around with all these technologies, and that was when I discovered Angular. It was like 0.6 or 0.7 back then. A lot of potential with it. So I was playing around. That was really cool. I went to a developer conference at a local college. That was pretty amazing, the things you can do with it, with so much less code, so much less maintenance. So I said, all right, how can we get to this? So we spent a few months throughout that year, started to move some of our apps there. It was great, and I loved it. So, but the problem was that HTML5 wasn't really hugely supported by Angular back then. Had to write a lot of custom directives, like including the date input type wasn't really supported. So I had to write like a directive to deal with maintenance on that. We updated it, you know. Just different little things like that. I had to move our apps from jQuery to that. We built large apps. I didn't want to throw them all out, so we had to migrate some of them to Angular and keep a lot of jQueries. It's been pretty brutal. It's getting better now as there's more new stuff coming in that needs to be done. So I started experimenting the middle end of last year with Angular Forms and HTML5 because I saw that potential 2 years ago and I was playing around a little, but the validation was kind of hokey with Angular. It's getting better with version 1.3. It's gotten pretty good. So anyway, Angular keeps your code clean, keeps it short, keeps it simple, fast, works great with mobile. So anyway, that's pretty much what I was trying to get across. That's just a brief introduction to myself and where I come from and how passionate I am about Angular. So this is the version that's currently out, the not stable release, which is more Angular Forms than 1.2. Although there's still some hokiness with, and I'll show you as we get into it. So let's go to the next slide. You can go to this website. I threw up a demo app, play around with it. If you want to download it, there's also a download link to download the app, although then you won't have the background image, but that's okay. So anyway, so needless to say, there's a lot of benefits to validating forms with Angular, HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, and I'll go into a lot of these concepts. It makes the world easier using patterns and all kinds of like CSS elements and stuff, using some of the methods that form validation for dealing with all that. So I'll show you in a sec. Let's go to the next one. All right, so this is basically an NG form. It's not a big deal. You just create a form and you have a name. If you're using Angular, you have a form and you have a name, like I have form with capital F. That is instantly our NG form. So you can access it using scope.form. Whatever you want to do with it, whether you want to see if it's valid, you want to see if it's pristine or submitted, you know, you can go all into that from that. So in this case, I just kind of show there's an input button, got a model, got a text model, and then a submit button with NGSubmit. You can use two different ways. I'll go into that later for submitting the form. NGSubmit is not the way I recommend, but it works if you just have one button. I'll go into that later, though. Next slide. All right. So needless to say, Angular form properties and CSS classes. So as you see, there's a lot of cool things you can control with Angular to make form validation really, really neat, really, really slick. So much less code. I mean, when we moved to Angular from jQuery and heavy JavaScript, our apps were 10 to 20,000 lines of JavaScript code. Now they're between 800 and like 1,400 lines of JavaScript code with a little bit of HTML thrown in there. But it's so much less, and our projects get done instead of a year or 8 months, 3 months, 2 weeks. So it's pretty powerful using Angular, and using Angular forms just makes it so much easier in my opinion. So if you look here, here's a couple of the different properties in CSS classes. You can tell if the form is valid, if it's invalid, pristine, dirty, or submitted. Valid just means everything in your HTML is good. Okay, then it's valid. If it's not, it's invalid. You can also go into individual elements and detect if your individual models within that form are valid or invalid, and you can display little messages. I'll kind of show you that in a little bit. But pristine is kind of, I haven't really had a lot of use for pristine and dirty, but if you want to tell if an object's been used at all, like inside of your input type, you can use pristine to tell if it's been changed at all. And if it isn't, then it's pristine. If it's changed, it's dirty. And I'll show you the CSS, and I'll show you the way you can actually implement it. And at the end, you can also have a submitted variable for dealing with your form, which could be useful, and I'll show you kind of how that works as well. It just says, hey, is the form submitted? Yes, okay, we're good. Submit. So you can deal with the CSS or JavaScript for dealing with that. So next slide.
Come on. There we go.
So essentially, I just threw together a couple little things to show you some of the actual JavaScript parts. So if you have a form, an NG form, you have a model like description, you have a span for dealing with that description or the form in general in this case. You can attach it to the individual elements, but in this case, I just have it attached to the whole form. So if there's anything invalid, I'm going to display this message that says invalid form. And that's what form.invalid says. It says your form is invalid, so we're going to display this message using ng show. Kind of a cool use of using submitted is when you have an add or an edit button. Now, when you're in the add state, you only want to add your form once. I mean, because if you're submitting multiple times the same information, I mean, it's just duplicate data. So obviously, it's kind of a neat way you can say, hey, it's submitted, so now it's NG disabled. It's not going to be able to access it anymore. It's kind of a use of NG disabled. Another use would be in your button here to submit. Is it valid? Is all the requirements met for this? Which there's no requirements. I'll kind of show you some of the requirements later. But you can use patterns, you can use require tags, just different things to say if this is valid. And then if it is, you're going to display the submit button, but only if you haven't submitted the form, because we're doing one add of that record into the database. So we don't want to have duplicate data. So when you have submitted it, now it's not going to be enabled anymore. You won't be able to access that run. So that's kind of a use for that. So we're on the next slide.
Is there a good pattern for like when you move to the next form element? Is there a good pattern to do that? You just check right away.
To the next.
Yeah, tap, you're going through into one element, and the next one drop down, you have a validation first without going to submit. Is there a good pattern to catch that?
To catch if you're.
The first that you just tap out.
Well, there's blur. There's a lot of other things, but I didn't really throw all of that in here. But there are a lot of indoor events that can cover that. Yeah, there are blur, which you can attach like some function in the back end, or if you want to maybe just have something right there in the HTML, something short and simple. Obviously, if it gets to be more than just one statement, you want to have it inside the method. But yeah, there are a lot of other elements outside of the scope of what I'm covering in this. I'm just showing you the form part of it. So I deal a lot with NG Show, NG Disabled, a lot of NGClick. I don't use NGSubmit. I showed you that exists, but I don't recommend it. I'll go into why not later. So if you go to the next one now. So here's just a couple of the CSS classes that are available. You can have other ones attached to this. So in this case, I just kind of show NG invalid. There's NG invalid and NG submit. So when the state is invalid, that input box is going to have some red in it, and it's going to have a white color. Valid, it's going to be green. You know, just little basic things, and it automatically changes. It's kind of an easy way of keeping track of that. You can also use .ng pristine or ng dirty in addition to this if you have further details, like, for example, the form's valid and it's pristine, we want it to be blue. Okay, well, then you have that case, because you can attach, obviously, multiple classes to it. So, or NGSubmit, that's another one. But we'll go more into that in a little bit. So, question? Oh.
I was asking if I should.
All right, so here's a couple of the form, Angular form methods. So needless to say, some of these aren't really spot on. So using Angular 1.3, there's some things that I've noticed that don't work perfectly. I use a lot of objects, JavaScript objects. So I might have an event dot home team, away team dot start time, end time, just a bunch of different things for my JavaScript objects, right? Well, the problem lies with Angular right now is there's some problems with the new version where it wasn't working with an object, but it was working with a single element. It's kind of weird. I mean, when you play around with my form, that if you go to the website and download it, you'll see I'm using actual just single variables and not a huge object, which was my original plan. But I realized there's a lot of errors with regards to resetting the form state with detecting if it's submitted or not. Also on mobile, submitted doesn't work the way you think. Like you should be using essentially .set untouch when you're dealing with a mobile device, because then it says, hey, you don't have that touch stash. You haven't touched your app yet using a mobile device. Or pristine for if you want to reset the state of the form back to the beginning. Just things like that. But I noticed there's some issues with that. You'll see that if you play around with my website on your phone or on a tablet. I was playing around with it for a long time, trying to figure it out, looking into information. It just seems like there's no information on it, but it doesn't work. So some of these things will become working, I imagine, probably by maybe 1.3 finalized version of 1.4. The version I'm using is the release net at 1.3 because they started to enable set pristine and set submitted, which I actually didn't include in this. But so anyway, so these are just a couple of methods, and I'll show you how those work as well. If you go to the next slide. So here's a function, you know, it's clear, you want to start over. So essentially, what I usually do is I have an object, but like I said, it doesn't quite work the way I imagined it should yet with pristine and submitted. Pristine works, but the submitted does not reset the variable as it should. So anyway, so you want to say set pristine starts it over. Set untouched is supposed to remove the NG touched when you touch your touchscreen or your tablet. And then you reset the person object, which is your form, which has a first name and a last name text input, back to null string. So that's essentially the idea. I'm just kind of showing you how a couple of those methods might work and how you might use them. Here we go, next one. All right, so submitting the form. There's two ways of doing it. There's essentially NGSubmitted and there's NGClick. NGSubmit, I'm not sure if any of you used these very much, a little bit. Have anyone used NGSubmit? Or just always NGClick? I imagine always NGClick. Yeah. NGSubmit is kind of a weird one. It's essentially attached to the form. So anyway, so you don't want to use both of them at the same time, because if you're using them both at the same time, NGSubmit is meant for it's attached to the form, you submit it once, and that's it. But if you're using NGClick, or if you're pressing enter, or if you're doing anything else outside of that, it submits. So you're gonna have multiple submissions, which is not good. So that's why you can't have NGSubmit. You can't have more than one button on the form if you're using NGSubmit. So it's kind of rough. So that's why I always recommend using NGClick, so you can customize based on each button. Submitting a form using Angular basically prevents the default action from firing, which is essentially submitting the form with the server request, refreshing the page. So if you're using NGClick or NGSubmit, you're not going to be firing that action. It's never going to happen. The only way you can overcome that is if you're using, within your form, you are using NGSubmit and you use an action. That's the most common way to override it. So it resets the page, sends the information to the server without actually doing an AJAX request, or maybe you have multiple AJAX requests as well. You can also use data action attributes or X action attributes as well to force that to happen. But I mean, in our world, we use a lot of AJAX, not really a lot of otherwise. So you can go to the next slide. So NGClick versus NGSubmit. NGSubmit can be attached to the form. That's it. That's what it is. Basically, it enables you to JavaScript function to it. It prevents the default action, and any button or pressing enter, or if you're using any NGClicks on the form, it will cause NGSubmit to fire as well. So you have multiple submissions, so you really don't want that. It starts to get really tricky, really hairy. Don't use it. Use NGClick. You have a lot more control with it. You can attach NGClick to any element. Still prevents the default action from firing, but it also can be bound to the JavaScript on clicking. So I think it's a lot more useful. NGSubmit, if you have one button and or press enter, that's it. So here's, oops, sorry. Sorry. So here's an example of NGSubmit. So you attach it to your form. That's the whole purpose. You have your name, which is form. Then you maybe have a date input type. Then you have an event, which is maybe Giants against Cardinals or some other type of game going on. That's our company deals a lot with sports, radio, TV, advertisement software. So I deal a lot with that. So anyway, so then you have a submit button. It could be a submit button, input type submit, or it could be a button, or it can be input button, or you just press enter and it will submit that form using NGSubmit. It's good, but like I said, you really don't have a lot of control of it. So if you can go to the next slide, this is what I recommend using NGClick, because then you can have an add, an edit, a delete button all in the same form and get the data and be able to manipulate it as following. Here, I kind of show an example of how you might use something like that to have a little more control. So you have, when you click at the top of the form, there might be an add or an edit button. When you click that, it'll bring you to either the edit screen, we have a list of games or a list of inventory types like radio or news or whatever. So basically you click on that and then you go to either the add or edit state of the form. So then basically it's going to show if it's valid and it's an add and it's not submitted, it'll show the add button. Otherwise, it's just not going to ever show the add button. Or if it's an edit, it'll show you if it's currently in the edit state, it's valid. Or if it's an add and the form submit, so it'll automatically go at the edit instead. You can play around, kind of figure it out what I'm trying to get at. I don't really want to go into too much detail on for you, but there's a lot of cool things you can do with the control based on these things. And then I have the delete, which also works in the edit state for a lot of our forms. So it's a lot more control.
Come on. Go ahead. That's the end of the slide deck.
There should be more.
Negative.
Hold on.
Form validation is just that easy. Slides have to be.
How many slides is that?
13.
Well, maybe that's it. If you can go to my first, if you can go to my first slide where that website is, now I'll walk you through how kind of my app works. And
Sweet,
kind of
yes.
walk you through a lot of how cool the things you do. I mean, honestly, you really didn't need to go there. Could have just told you the link.
Sure, I guess.
So needless to say, here's my app. Obviously, it's not like huge. It's not a lot. I don't have any database processing going on. But you hit add, brings you to this add state. There might be an edit button as well, which will bring you to a list. But I didn't want to go into all that. So needless to say, I threw in a whole bunch of different borders. So you see these are dots, and these are dashes. So this is oh no, this is Safari.
Oh, I can open it.
Oh no! They don't support HTML5!
2 seconds. 2 seconds.
We force our clients to use Google Chrome. We have complete control of our apps.
That's awesome. Boom check. All right.
All of the teams who deal in baseball, football, basketball, soccer, everything, Google Chrome. They're forced to for our apps.
There we go.
So, all right, good. So now we have a date picker. That was the whole purpose. So basically, click on the drop down. So, could I borrow this for a second so I can kind of show this actually?
I don't have it mirrored.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So how do I right click with this thing? So, is this Google Chrome or no?
Yeah, this is Chrome.
How do I get it to go away? Anyway, all right. So, well, I have it memorized. So, you want to
Did
say.
you want to go into the.
I have it memorized. So, you want to say here in your date, the only input validators you have is that's required. And it needs to be a date. Now, if you click escape or delete, click delete. Now it becomes invalid. Which also, since we went from the pristine state, which was a whole bunch of giant dots, now we went to little dots. Just to kind of show you can do dirty, you can do pristine, you can do valid, invalid, which I have all that in there. which is kind of cool. So it's not a big deal with the date one. It's important that it's valid, but you don't want to submit 10-nothing. So you want to say,
You can take my machine over there if you want to.
sure. So you want to say, I don't really need to go into details to minimize, but yeah. So we're gonna go here, select the date, October 22nd. So it works, it's good, everything's clean. You see, like, now it has white borders instead of, this one is this one is pristine, not dirty. This one's dirty, so. I mean,
That's the white versus the gray.
yeah. Which, I mean, obviously it's not a huge difference, not really graphically, you're not really gonna care, but maybe someone really cares about knowing if that has not been changed yet. In addition to the fact that it needs to be valid or invalid based on whatever criteria you put in there. So in this case, that's good. Home team, the only requirements for home team is that it needs to be more than 5 characters. So in this case, we'll just go here and we'll go like home team. What? Sorry. I'm not used to this.
It's okay.
It's just a keyword.
Hey, stop that.
It does, it's weird.
It's a different keyboard.
All right, so Arizona Cardinals, that's the only requirement for the home team field is that it's a text input field, needs to be greater than 5 characters. Also that it needs to be, so I can kind of see there might be one other little one.
That's not it. That one's it. Yep.
Okay, so also the other requirements is that your form can't be just submitted. If the form's submitted, it instantly becomes disabled. So you can't resubmit an add command, because you don't want to re-add the same data. So essentially, the min name's 5. Doesn't look like I have any patterns on that, so that's good, but it's required, so that's pretty much for that. The way is identical to that.
Here, if you want to take the laptop over to the podium, so you don't have to stand up on the TV.
Oh, okay. All right, so there we go. So you have the New York Giant. Oh, Jesus. Well, whatever. That's okay. Is it still? Jesus. I don't like these things. They're so weird. All right, New York Giants. We're good. All right, we're good. So that's cool. So basically, that one has the same requirement. The description has a little bit different requirement. Basically, I have where it needs to be either nothing or it needs to be greater than 5 characters. So basically, what I'm doing is to do that. Yeah, so basically, there's a max length. You can only have A through Z, capital, lowercase a through Z, 0 through 9, underscore, hyphen. I thought I allowed spaces, but maybe not. All right. Well, no, I do allow spaces. All right, yeah. That's what that dash S is. So essentially, you can use in HTML5 something called patterns, which is essentially a expression language, right? So it's kind of a cool way of filtering the data that you're passing in. Makes it an easier way of validating the form. You don't want to have to go through JavaScript and just keep moving through each element, making sure everything is right like people used to back in the day. You want to have an easier way. So expression language really solves that problem, and you can include within your HTML and Angular to include for the validation. So essentially, Arizona, is it not all caps?
Yep.
Versus, yep. So, oh, right, you can't have a period though. So, plus there's no special characters. So you might have some requirements with your expression language. Now you'll see some crazy requirements for my receiver, which I use, it's required, but also the first first 6 characters are static. You need to have a capital X, capital B, capital S, capital P, -0. Then you need to have either 0, 1, 2, or 4. This is a real thing we have.
What is this for?
This is receivers we have to deal with.
What's a receiver?
Stations. Essentially a way that we have our database, but then we have a receiver which has their game information. So we save it on our app, it saves in our database, sends information to a receiver. The receiver goes, hey, remember this, on October 22nd, there's gonna be a game. Here's your receiver information for the ID for your receiver in their database. So we need to communicate that information back and forth. Then when the game actually takes place, we actually have people watching the game or listening to the game, and they're like, all right, it's coming to a commercial, it's coming up. All right, commercial. And then they hit a button a couple times, sends information to a receiver, shoots the advertisement through the air, sends that advertisement to their TV or radio station. So that's kind of what our receiver is. It's a way of. Those guys get
Because I think I'm qualified.
well, those guys get paid like $8 to like $20 an hour. You've been there a long time, right? You start at the bottom, but again, you have a family. You be with the CEO. That you have a family and stuff. CEO work. He's pretty awesome. But I can't guarantee he's going to give you $20 an hour. Those are the guys that did that. It's a real easy job, but it's somebody has to do it, quite literally, because believe it or not, that world still exists. People need to listen to the game or watch the game and know when the commercials come out. Then when it does, they hit that button like 4 or 5 times, send the information to the receiver, commercial, wake up, and then it shoots that advertisement to the station, and the station goes, oh, okay, here in advertisements.
Burgeoning potential for face recognition software, you heard of that job, right? That score was made into a step.
Right. All right, so anyway, so like I was saying, there's requirements for this. So you need to have wait, what was it? So there's Pro 4s and there's Pro 1s and Pro 2 receivers. Essentially, a Pro 1 or Pro 2 is going to have one site attached to the receiver. A Pro 4 can have up to 4 sites attached to it. So there's a little difference in how the MUX card works in Pro 1 and Pro 2, but not a lot. Whereas Pro 4, you can have a lot more information in it. So not something you really need to know, but something I have to deal with regularly. So there's the requirements, it works. Now this form's ready to submit. So quite literally, if you look at my form, I also have these states, which in the beginning, this form.pristine was true. Form.dirty was false in the beginning. Valid was also false, because I saw all these red ones. But now it's valid. So this add game button appears. So that's kind of the usefulness of dealing with Angular for validation. Because, hey, well, you know, now it's okay. You're not going to submit bad data to the database. You don't have to go to the back end or go to your JavaScript. You don't even need to go to your JavaScript and validate anything because you know everything's 100% valid. This is what you need to submit to the database, these requirements that you get in regex and all of these other technologies. So it's, sorry, I'm tripping. So you see there's also, I have a show state, which actually I clicked accidentally. There we go. Sorry, I'll start over. I'll go faster as I won't actually do this one. So needless to say, okay, you can't have one character greater. That's the maximum size of a serial code for a receiver. So now you can add it. So when you click add, what literally the state is now submitted. So I have the whole form become green. Obviously, you're not going to want to do that. That's kind of silly.
It's a good visual for a presentation.
Yeah. So there we go. So I hid that when I had someone click there. So anyway, so there you go. So yeah, hey, it's huge. It's ridiculous. But you know what? It's mid now. Which also now you can no longer access these fields because now you don't want to send it to the database. Your NGSubmitted is now true. So everything becomes disabled. It's kind of a usefulness of using the submit variable attached to the form element. As you see also, everything is exactly as it is with the exception. Has anyone worked with dates very much in HTML5 and at all? So you're familiar with the way
everything
you
sucks
it.
when it gets to date and time and browser. Everything.
Well, it's pretty easy when you start to understand it and you start to deal with it correctly. It gets to be pretty easy. I've got over it. I initially had a lot of issues because the time offset, we have to deal a lot with time offsets because we're dealing with teams all across the United States, so crap is all jacked up. So you don't want to pass your date to a JavaScript variable, so new date and pass like what you're getting from that date field because it's 2014 hyphen 10 hyphen 16. Whereas you see it as 10/16/2014. So I mean, it's not a big deal, but I'm using an Angular filter. Which was this?
No, it is. You're not mirrored, so you need to scroll all the way right to get it on this screen. Yeah.
There you go. Oh, okay. Okay, there I am. All right. So, but as you see, my my date object is not what you gain from that. Because this will give you the valid date if you pass that to the backend. Because now you're no longer dealing with time zones. It's quite literally the first minute of that day unless you put a time attached to it. But if you're not, and you're doing 2014, blah, 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 it messes everything up. So you must say, and everything's good to submit. So there's all your home. It's not Arizona Cardinals, it's not New York Giants, it's rah, 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 you know, but so. But needless to say, that's kind of a usefulness of form validation using Angular. You can really get into the nitty-gritty. Pristine, dirty. Some people like it. I haven't really seen a huge purpose where we're at. We use submit some for dealing with the actual add command and not edit and delete. Problem, if you go into your mobile phone, you access this, and you try doing it on your phone, and you click add, and then you click this nice button right here, which is start over, which I'll show you here in a step, which that reset everything. Everything's good. Your submit is now false. Your dirty is now false because the app is not touched. It is now pristine, which means it's clean. It's untainted, I guess. And it's now not valid because your requirements are not met. So if you access this on your phone and you click that start over button, it's not going to work because Angular still has some kinks to work out with form validation. This NG, this form dot submitted is going to show up as true still. Pristine and dirty, I think, will be set, and valid will be set, but not be submitted. It's kind of frozen because in touchscreen like devices that submitted one, they still haven't worked everything out. But everything else works. That's why we don't use the submit in apps we're doing mobile websites. So. But it's kind of cool.
I got a question.
Go on.
To the date. So when you feed the date, your NG model date for that date is just year, month, day string.
Yeah.
So my problem is what I ran into is if I feed it that date,
Oh, you can. Yeah.
it's going to assume it's UTC, and then all of a sudden it's going to be the day before.
Yeah. And so that's why here in the JavaScript world, you want it to be correct. You want it to be the way they want it to be formatted. But on your server side, you want it to be passed, like I said, in that kind of way. I've always had it work correctly. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying if I were to feed that, if my NG model had, July 4th of this year,
Okay.
right? But all I gave it was 2014-07-04.
Yeah.
And I don't give it anything else. It's going to assume
Yeah,
that
it's wrong.
UTC,
It's
but
a
I'm
day
sitting here
before.
at Citric. Yeah.
But
so
it's
gonna show
not
up,
actually-
and that it's going to show up at July 3rd.
It's not actually a day before.
Well, it's not the day before. It's the offset of UTC.
Yes, exactly. So the way to get around that is, let me see if I can access my.
Yeah, you should be able to see your sources in there. If you,
Yeah, but it's not accurate. Because I can't actually view my HTML, so. I want to open that file. Can I see it?
it's a zip. It's gonna open it as a folder.
Yeah, just click on the,
Did it open?
Yeah, scroll all the way over to the left there, the little guy with the face.
you should be able to do your HTML inspector.
Yeah.
It might be on the other screen.
Oh yeah, is it on your screen? Good call.
All right, I don't see it actually. It's a dude, you said, please.
Here. Let me see if I can get it.
I don't know, I'm not a Mac person, I'm sorry. I have an iPhone, it's new to me. I promise, I just switched from Android.
You want a PC real quick?
Yeah,
It'll
right.
take about 2 seconds to do that.
Which file did you want? Index?
Well, I just want to unzip it and then open up the HTML, the index.html.
Okay.
And show you kind of a useful filter for fixing that problem.
Whoops. This?
Yeah. Scroll down a little bit. Scroll on a little bit. Oh, there it is. So, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a date filter, which kind of, so basically it's taking that 2014 hyphen, July hyphen 16, or whatever it was. Go on.
I've got a directive that I wrote that deals with that,
Yeah,
fixing all the data and stuff.
yeah.
And show that.
There is something built in Angular. You need to go to the website.
Angular, Angular does not support anything regarding time zones. In fact, they say it on their website, unless it's changed in the last couple of months, they actually say it on their website that if you're dealing with time zone issues, you're screwed. Now, I'm using a custom directive as well and dropping the HTML5 data input because you just can't even use the data input at all.
Well, and I also wrote a job. I used to do directive stuff, but I kind of got away from it for some of the basics. I have just a JavaScript function that, hey, which format is this? Oh, you have numbers first, like this way, so I know how to change it. So essentially, there's ways you can format it. Because you want it to be, like you said, 10.13, 19.1, not 19.1, 10.13.
Well, just, yeah, because I'm using scheduling software, and if
Yeah.
I'm scheduling something in New York,
No,
HTML5 inputs will only let me see it at my time.
Yeah, we had that problem often. I swore there was something in Angular, I could be wrong, maybe I'm using a custom method myself. I haven't done it in a while.
Search the Google together.
Yeah, check them out, they might have something, Angular.org. Angular.js.
Yes.
Somebody's squatting on that.
China. That's cool. All right. Go to developer, go develop, and go to API.
But that's in the filter, this doesn't affect an input.
Right.
Because I'm using moment
One,
for my
Yeah.
formatting.
Where's to JSON, there's all that stuff. There's to JSON, to date, or no.
So if you just Google Angular day time zone, is this what you're looking for? I mean, just like the Angular days.
Yeah, but no, there's, I thought there was like a function on the left. Can you scroll that down a little bit? See if there is. Great. Server.
I wrote.
Yeah, there might not be.
It's kind of.
Click on the filter. Date.
Yeah.
Scroll down. Yeah. So wait, you could actually take in that object. Yeah, date. Then you have the date object you're passing into it, and you pass the format and the time zone.
Oh, you can use UTC or your current time zone.
Right now, only UTC is supported.
Yeah.
Not specified, it's what your browser has.
Yeah.
You can take the UTC time and then add the local current time zone offset to the time.
That's what I was doing in my app. I just took whatever it is, add the time zone.
But you don't solve it. You want to add whatever time zone you're in to get the job script to get the time zone offset.
Yeah, the offset, exactly.
So like we're.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways of solving that. It's kind of an interesting problem, though. We experienced it for a while. We were having games that were hours off, and that's scary.
Not so good.
Yeah. But yeah, so did anyone have any other questions in regards to Angular forms or? Yeah.
All right, you're using 1.3. What's all different between 1.2 and 1.3? This seems fairly familiar, but I'm trying to remember what specifically did we do?
A couple of the functions are new. And didn't work properly. So I was using 1.2 and a lot of stuff wasn't really awesome. They're trying to get more of this. And like I said, so that problem that I'm experiencing on the mobile devices and the problem I'm experiencing with JavaScript objects, it's a real problem right now with Angular, with mobile devices and JavaScript objects. And we're using the forms for the submitted, we're using forms for keeping track of other states. So they're trying to get it better, clean out some of those problems. That's what 1.3 is supporting more of those methods that I've shown, set received and set submitted is an area that we support. But right now in its current version, it doesn't work on mobile entirely, and objects work entirely. So, I mean, so some of these things they might solve your problem or they might not. I mean, so, but the Angular usefulness of forms separate from those issues are great. Like, I use objects personally. I don't use submitted very much because I try not to deal with that because of its lack of support. and I don't use, that's it, I just don't use Submit very much. But or Dirty or Pristine, honestly. The main ones I really use are valid or invalid, so that way I can at the end say, hey, we're good to go, or no, we're not, you know, then I show it on the pilot. And if your HTML5 is valid. It's amazing, like the capabilities with all of that, it really has reduced development time a lot. And a lot of just stupid little loops and searching through strings or index of this to make sure that's not in there, or using regex on your JavaScript code. You can now do all in your HTML. Which they proposed this back in 2011, 2012 when HTML5 was coming out and it was a big deal. And now Angular is taking over that world and it's becoming better and better. So I highly recommend it. I mean, you can play around with this app, you can see all the cool capabilities. Like I said, you might not see a huge use for the Submit, Pristine, and the Dirty. You might though. Pristine and Dirty, maybe. Not so much was stated in its current broken state. But everything else works great. It flows beautifully. It makes things simple, less. The CSS, as you see, it alters it on the fly and doesn't become valid until it's all the criteria is met. It's pretty cool. So, great, cool. What do you guys think?
I think it's awesome.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions, we can get to Prizatron time.
The amazing prize.
If we're so amazed by this, we want to give this app money. How do we do that?
I was just kidding.
I'm so glad you asked,
You
Joel.
don't have to, but you could if you want.
There's a sweet little donate button on the About page.
Which, by the way, nobody has ever clicked. That's all right. I'm not.
Let's start with the winners from tonight.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't touch it. So you never. Maybe somebody did. I just have no idea. Just like some guy in Canada. He's like, sweet.
All right. Okay, that. And event ID. All right, so for those who haven't been here before and don't know what we're doing right now, our esteemed member Dale here wrote this lovely little Heroku app that hooks up with Meetup.com and their RSVP API for our event. And we can see all, hopefully, 48 people. What did I do wrong, Bill?
I think sometimes it takes a second.
It's built in English.
It was built in England. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. No, it hits the.
Since no one's paid, you just turned it off.
That's right. There might be a defect there. I don't know.
Premium.
Premium. Right, another request to be submitted. Would you like to join?
Are you using Google Chrome or
That's
Firefox?
the TV you have to turn on next to it.
It's
Oh, did it turned off?
Add some.
Oh. What is it?
Right at 8 o'clock it's on.
Or it's neon?
Yeah.
Push them all.
There you
No, it's bad. You know what? Yeah, I'm in incognito, so I wonder if that was the problem. Go. All right. That? Nope, that's not that one.
You're, yeah, you
That one.
YouTube now.
Backwards.
Regenerate.
Yeah. Be cool, YouTube. Be cool.
No, it's cut off at the top.
That's the border of the part.
It's broadcasting live.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so here's the 48 people who came, not. And what we do is we give out some prizes. So JetBrains has generously sponsored us to give away one license to one of their IDE products every month. The choices are down here. If you win, I will be asking you which one you want and asking you for an email address. I can send them. Front-End Masters is run by a local guy named Mark Urbanski over in Savage. He runs a workshop series. I believe they're doing a functional JavaScript 2-day workshop coming up soon. So check out frontendmasters.com to sign up for that. But he has all the previous workshops he's done up as videos for training on his website. So I'll be giving away a 1-year sub to that website, courtesy of Mark.
I think he's also doing some free Angular training stuff too. So
is he?
Yeah. I mean,
Oh, I hadn't heard about that.
I'm not sure. I think they're already pre-recorded videos. I don't think they're interactive. But
Oh, well, yeah, he did an Angular workshop not long ago. That maybe he's releasing those for free. I know he was trying to work with Pluralsight too, so it might be possible some of this stuff gets up on Pluralsight, which we also have 1-month sub cards from them. So come see me if you win that, and we'll just go get them. Is there in the office here? Okay, so without further ado, we'll pick some winners. Then our first winner is Tom. Is Tom here? For shame, Tom.
Put him on the shame board.
That's too. That's what you do.
Yeah. If you're listening, Tom, shame on you.
Show him. Mill. Is Mill here? Oh, this might go bad. I'm gonna have to just a big shame. Paul. Is Paul here? Oh God.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. What would you like? Ruby Mine. All right. I will ask you for your email address afterwards. Cool. All right. So JetBrains is taken, and our next winner is Glenn. Is Glenn here? All right. What would you like? You have Front-End Masters 1-year sub or a Pluralsight 1-month card? All right. We will send Glenn the on Front-End Masters. I'll need your email address afterwards here, so you can see me after. And Robert Hansen. Robert here. John. John, go get yourself a Pluralsight card.
I'll take the Pluralsight.
We'll ask John to get one from you were asked to get it.
I guess so. I mean,
So like I said, next month we'll probably have Scott Silvey doing a little bit more about diving into Angular scope digest cycles and building your own Angular. I have stickers. I actually found some more Angular event stickers, so if you would like one, I have more, and I have a ton of Angular test stickers too that I don't remember who, but a former member of ours gave it to me. So
Where can I buy a t-shirt like that?
you can buy an awesome t-shirt like this one that I have on Redbubble. I set up Angular Event with a Redbubble account, and proceeds from those are going to help the group. So
I want, for anybody who cares, I want 2 of the hoodies off of
that was you.
That
Okay.
was me.
I get notices when people buy something. I don't get to notices of who it is.
Oh, no, and they are great. They're very nice.
Yeah, they're super nice customer service. It comes quickly. It's a little spendy, but I mean they're proof things one at a time.
They'll put the logo on pretty much anything.
Yeah, they'll put a logo on
anything.
We'll leave it at that. Thanks a lot for coming. Please grab pizza and beverages on your way out. Take them home with you. We don't need them.
Does anybody care about the daytime stuff?
Let's see it. Let's see it, Daryl.
It's, there's 2.
Bonus content. Oh, yeah.
All right. Since can I see if I can do it on the night?
Yep.
there it is.
So on my GitHub account, what a handsome picture.
Yeah.
So I've got a daytime picker. There's kind of two things that work in conjunction here, two directives. And this one's really kind of the one that I think is interesting. So,
You want mirror displays? I should have offered this to you earlier, Doc.
None of the main presentations.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's easier.
Now that it's for bonus. All right. So where did it go?
Oh, shit.
Hold on, that sea of tabs up there.
Okay. So what's really interesting, what I thought was interesting about this is just a directive that you put on an input, and that's intended to be daytime. Right? There isn't anything really fantastic about it. It's actually incredibly simple.
Ducky?
Yeah, that's my nickname. We won't ask. Then basically, all it does is when it gets a value in, it just tries to turn into something that moment can understand. Right? So it just tries to create a date from moment and then see if that date's valid. So what's cool about this is that if you have regular JavaScript data object in the model, you store it as an input, it looks goofy. It looks kind of like you fill up this down.
Is that something you wrote, or are you using OpenID?
I'm using Moment. So I'm just using.
It's supposed to have style.
It is supposed to have style.
You do Command Alt J, you'll see the dev console.
I like you on that round.
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh my God. It's loaded over HTTPS for that.
Oh, I have HTTPS always on. I don't think you're not gonna succeed with that.
Okay.
Do you want to be seen?
I work on a Mac.
It's one of those bajillion boxes over there. You could touch and turn it off.
PCs are always insecure. There you go.
No.
that's gonna blame the computer.
Happy smiley face there?
Go to Chrome.
Still cognito.
Yeah.
Where do I see my own? There's a URL for that, right?
No, he is using Chrome.
It's control.
Yeah, that's it. There we go.
There it is. HTTPS everywhere.
It's a fun one.
Well,
There you go.
Oh, that's a good thing to know.
Oh, yeah.
So if you just have a plain old datetime object, this is the datetime picker, right? It looks different. It looks goofy. If you just throw it in there and let it render it however the browser is going to render it, right? So the way you fix that is you throw this directive on there, and if it's valid, it'll set the validity, of course, and if it's not. But then it uses these two formatter. It uses a formatter function here, and then a hook onto the border to kind of deal with when you type into it. So now, it's I can't demo this actually working, but I can do things like January 1, 2014. That would work if the directive was on it. But you can type whatever you want to. So it's a very small little bit of code to deal with validation and then formatting. So I don't know if you've worked with the parsers or formatters at all on the model, on the controller, on NG model. So this is the NG model controller. You just put this parser first, and this validate function, the parsers first, and then So I'll update my example here, but once you have all of that work in, then it'll display correctly in the input box. And it's kind of nice because you can, you can use it for anything.
Whoa.
Use it for any of the inputs that you want. So those are the two. I don't know. Cool. But I thought I just spent a little bit of time. This is probably one of the very first things I ever wrote in Angular, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I don't know if I do it still, but it worked, and so yeah, and you can get it through Bower. And
Oh, you published it to Bower?
yeah, these are both
Awesome.
published to Bower. So you can use that. All right. I mean, I've never really had anybody using this one. I think I'm probably the only one watching it. And the bill is kind of
Wait, is there a donate button?
There will be. Just check later. Check back later. But yeah. Anyway, that was it. Cool. So,
Thanks a lot, Dale. All right, I'll tweet out those links. Otherwise, bonus content.
All right, wait, more of that.